This is the Music Halls of Fame podcast. This week we honor the year 1989 along with a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame class of 1989. We also look at the case for putting Soundgarden into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and our Spotlight Hall of Fame is the Grammy Museum Hall of Fame in Los Angeles, California. Before we get going with the podcast, like everyone tells you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you'll know when these podcast episodes drop, which is usually every Thursday. Now, on to this week's episode. In music for the year 1989, the factors that set the stage for the seismic changes in music and pop culture in the 1990s started to show themselves in 1989. Even though pop and R&B still ruled dance music with artists like Madonna, Janet Jackson, and Karen White, trance, house, acid house, and rave culture began to work its way from America into worldwide youth culture, especially in Great Britain. Songs like Maurice's This Is Acid and D-Mob's We Call It Acid hit number one on the Billboard dance charts, along with Inner City's classic song Good Life, along with Little Louie's French Kiss. Eurodance also became popular, with acts like Technotronic putting out classic dance tracks like Pump Up the Jam, which set up the Eurodance craze in the early 1990s. Meanwhile, bands like the Stone Roses, New Order, 808 State, and the Happy Mondays worked their magic in both rave culture and Britpop. Britain's take on hip-hop broke through with artists like Nena Cherry and Soul to Soul. De La Soul's album 3 Feet High and Rising continued America's alternative hip-hop trend. Elsewhere in hip-hop, there were artists showing up on the pop charts like LL Cool J, Heavy D and the Boys, the Beastie Boys, EPMD, Tone Loc, Young MC, MC Lyte, Big Daddy Kane, Queen Latifah with her debut album All Hail the Queen, Third Base, Biz Markie, Ice-T, DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, and Chubb Rock. 1989 was also the year that Ice Cube left NWA. Two Live Crew's album, As Nasty as They Wanna Be, would become a favorite conservative target, with politicians still claiming that hip-hop was dangerous to America and that this album was Exhibit A. In the next couple of years, the Two Live Crew would be arrested in Florida on obscenity charges for performing songs from the album, and a United States court would make the album the first album in American history to legally be declared obscene, which led to the album being banned in most corporate record stores until a heavily censored version of the album could be put out. The group eventually would be acquitted of those obscenity charges, by the way. All of this fear-mongering about hip-hop would eventually be softened in the early 1990s by mainly two artists, for better or worse, Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer, who made hip-hop more palatable to suburban parents and sold millions of copies of their albums in the process. Nirvana released their first recording, Bleach, on Sub Pop Records, the label that would help break grunge into the mainstream in the early 1990s and help to completely transform music in the 90s. Nine Inch Nails released Pretty Hate Machine. Within a few years, they would help jumpstart industrial music. The New Kids on the Block started off a new wave of boy band mania, as the group's album Hangin' Tough led to them being almost everywhere on TV and radio for a couple of years. A late-night talk show would end up playing a part in the cultural transformation as well. The Arsenio Hall Show debuted late in 1989, going for a younger audience than the normal late-night viewing crowd. It soon crossed over into the mainstream, especially with corporate America who wanted to sell their products to people under 30. Arsenio's show helped to break artists like MC Hammer, Paula Abdul, and Mariah Carey in the early 1990s. It also, in a weird pop culture moment in 1992, had then presidential candidate Bill Clinton play the saxophone in order to appeal to the youth vote. It worked. Clinton won the 1992 election and became a two-term president. Bands that formed in 1989 include Marilyn Manson, Stone Temple Pilots, Type O Negative, Four Non Blondes, the Dixie Chicks, Beats International, Belle Biv DeVoe, the Black Crowes, the Cranberries, Damn Yankees, CNC Music Factory, EMF, En Vogue, Brand Nubian, The Breeders, Dred Zeppelin, Fear Factory, Firehouse, Fuel, The Lightning Seeds, Lynch Mob, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, Hole, Infectious Grooves, Oaktown 357, Joe Public, Orbital, Real McCoy, The Rembrandts, Teenage Fan Club, School of Fish, Silk, and The Wallflowers. Not a bad lineup for 90s music, technically. Bands that broke up in 1989 include Accept, The Lords of the New Church, Night Ranger, The Bangles, Autograph, Quiet Riot, Dawkins, DeBarge, The Style Council, Till Tuesday, Survivor, Hip Sway, The Jackson 5, Gladys Knight and the Pips, and Wah Wah Nee. The Plasmatics actually reformed in 1989 until lead singer Wendy O. Williams' death. Bobby Brown's Don't Be Cruel was the biggest selling album of the year. Other big albums that year were by, among others, Milli Vanilli, Debbie Gibson, Fine Young Cannibals, Madonna, Bonnie Raitt, Alana Miles, Extreme, XTC, The Goo Goo Dolls, Soul to Soul, Richard Marx, Tom Petty, The Cult, Great White, The Cure, Nena Cherry, Clint Black, Reba McEntire, 10,000 Maniacs, Queen, and Prince's Batman soundtrack. Bands like Tesla, not the car company obviously, rode the last wave of the hairband era as the double shot of grunge music and Guns N' Roses were about to crush the hairband era in the next couple of years. Madonna's music video for her song Like a Prayer created controversy and was banned by MTV, along with her losing her sponsorship with Pepsi. Like a Prayer, by the way, was also the biggest selling single of the year. The controversy may have had something to do with it selling even more copies. Other big singles were the Bangles' Eternal Flame, Phil Collins' Another Day in Paradise, Roxette's The Look, the B-52s with Love Shack, Chicago with Look Away, Paula Abdul with Straight Up and also Cold Hearted Snake, Janet Jackson's Miss You Much, and Poison's classic Every Rose Has Its Thorn. Musical artists who were born in 1989 included Taylor Swift, Ally Michalka of Ally and AJ, Chris Brown, Jason Derulo, DJs Zed and Avicii, Tyga, Mike Will Made It, Joe Jonas of the Jonas Brothers, Baby Rexha, rapper G-Eazy, also Prince Royce, Trace Cyrus, and Jordan Sparks from American Idol fame. Musical artists who passed away in 1989 included composers Irving Berlin, Mikhail Chilecki, Virgil Thompson, Sammy Fain, Jan Sicker, Lennox Berkeley, Vaclav Kaslik, George Lynn, Donald Voorhees, opera singer Einar Anderson, musicians Billy Tipton, Joe Raposo, Roy Eldridge, Vincent Crane, Damaso Perez Prado, Pete DeFreitas, Albany Jones, Hibari Masora, Carl Stewart Hamblin, Alan Civil, and Pedro Vargas. Also, country music singers Keith Whitley and Blaze Foley, jazz trumpet player Woody Shaw, guitarist John Cipollina, conductors Giuseppe Patani and John Pritchard, singers Nara Leo, Richard Bedbedov, Raul Sexas, and Bradley Kincaid, folk singers Ewan McCall and Trevor Lucas, band leader Henry Hall, radio disc jockey Roger Scott, singer and soldier Barry Sadler, who sang the Ballad of the Green Beret, and pianist John Ogden. As far as the Grammys for the actual year in music of 1989, Bonnie Raitt won Album of the Year for the album Nick of Time, while Bette Midler's Wind Beneath My Wings won Song and Record of the Year. Milli Vanilli ended up winning Best New Artist. However, on October 20th, 1990, the Recording Academy, who hands out the Grammy Awards, stripped Milli Vanilli of their award. When it was found out that the two people who claimed to have sung on the debut album, Fabrice Morvan and Rob Pilatus, never actually sang the songs. They are, to date, the only artists who have ever had their Grammy Awards taken away from them. The award remains vacant because the Academy says it doesn't actually keep tabs on who placed second in the voting. For the record, the other nominees for Best New Artist that year were Neneh Cherry, the Indigo Girls, Tone Loc, and Soul II Soul. At the Eurovision Singing Contest that was held in Switzerland, Croatia, which was then actually a part of Yugoslavia, won for the song Rock Me. At the Tony Awards, Jeremy Robbins' Broadway won Best Musical, and Our Town won Best Revival of a Musical. The Pulitzer Prize for Music was shared between Roger Reynolds for Whispers Out of Time, Stephen Stuckey's Concerto for Orchestra, and Bright Sheng for Hyun Lacerations in Memoriam 1966 to 1976. At the MTV Video Music Awards, Neil Young won Video of the Year for This Note's for You, a song about artists who started pushing corporate products like Coke and Pepsi. Less than 20 years later, that's pretty much the music industry standard now, isn't it? The show also made headlines for comedian Andrew Dice Clay when he performed Not Safe for Work nursery rhymes, which was always part of his gig, but it led to him getting banned from future ceremonies. At the American Music Awards, New Kids on the Block, Paula Abdul and Milli Vanilli were the big winners. And in the music categories at the Academy Awards, Under the Sea from The Little Mermaid won Best Original Song, and The Little Mermaid won Best Original Score. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony was held on January 18th at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel in New York City. At that ceremony, the Hall inducted producer Phil Spector into the non-performers category. The Ink Spots, Bessie Smith, and the Soul Stirrers were inducted into the early influencers category, and in the performers category, the Hall inducted Dion, the Rolling Stones, Stevie Wonder, the Temptations, and this next legend. Otis Redding was born on September 9, 1941. He has been called one of the greatest singers of popular music ever. He was a member of Little Richard's backup band, The Upsetters, for a time, and also Johnny Jenkins's band, The Pine Toppers. He started recording as a solo artist in 1962 with Stax Records. His first single was the classic These Arms of Mine in 1962. In 1964, he put out his debut album, Pain in My Heart. What followed was an incredible amount of album and touring production. In fact, as far as touring went, he toured the South and Europe continuously for the better part of the decade, all the while recording song after song. In 1964 and also 1965, Otis put out 3 albums. These Arms of Mine was his first in 1964, and in March of 1965, he put out his second album, The Great Otis Redding Sings Soul Ballads. That album had Otis's first big hit, Mr. Pitiful. While on tour to support this album, Otis started working on songs that would become a part of his next album. He decided that most of the songs would be cover versions of soul songs. 3 of the original songs were co-written by him: I've Been Loving You Too Long, Respect, and Old Man Trouble. Respect would be slowed down and then covered by Aretha Franklin with her classic version. The entire album was recorded in 3 days. He started it on April 19th, then stopped working on it for a time, and then got back and finished it on July 9th and 10th. He was backed up by the members of the Memphis Souls, the Bar-Kays, and Booker T and the MGs. That album, Otis Blue, Otis Redding Sings Soul, was released on September 15, 1965. And although the album only made it to number 75 on the Billboard Albums chart, 3 of the singles became top 40 hits: I've Been Loving You Too Long, Respect, and Shake. The album is considered one of the greatest albums of all time, even though most of it is actually just cover songs. After Otis blew, Otis's career started going better and better. By 1967, Otis was hitting his stride, and after years of being the workhorse for Stax Records, he was finally getting his due. His gravelly vocals plus his sex appeal and energetic performances were winning over audiences worldwide. He started off by breaking through to the mainstream at the Monterey Rock Festival in 1967. The same festival who saw The Who and Jimi Hendrix rise to prominence. Aretha Franklin made a hit out of his song Respect that year, and Redding was getting some respect of his own with songs like Try a Little Tenderness. Otis was starting to achieve crossover stardom finally. On December 10th, 1967, Redding left a Memphis recording studio having worked on the song Sitting on the Dock of the Bay that would end up being his biggest hit. He didn't have time to finish recording the lyrics for the end of the song, so he whistled the melody, intending to finish recording the lyrics when he got back from a trip. He needed to get to a TV performance in Cleveland, Ohio, and then a concert in Madison, Wisconsin, so he took a private plane. As the plane approached the runway in Madison, Wisconsin, it crashed into a small lake, killing Otis and all but one person on the plane. Otis Redding was 36 years old. The song, Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, was released after his death and became the first posthumous song to hit number 1 on the Billboard Singles Chart. Presented for induction by class of 1986 Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee Little Richard, Otis Redding, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, class of 1989. Before we get to the rest of the podcast, we'd like to tell you about our other podcast, the Music History Today podcast. Every day we tell you what happened on that date in music history, along with music releases, birthdays, and passings. So, if you like this podcast and want more music history, then please search the Music History Today podcast in audio or video form on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast from. Soundgarden was voted the 14th greatest band on VH1's Greatest Hard Rock Bands of All Time list. They were nominated for 9 Grammy Awards, winning 2 of them. They were the first of the 4 horsemen of grunge, Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and along with them, to sign a record deal, even though they were not the first to break through. That honor still goes to Nirvana. They were, however, as influential due to their songwriting style, especially with their use of time signatures, and Chris Cornell's voice. Chris's voice is what really sets them apart from the other Seattle bands, and he's a huge reason why they should be in. Chris Cornell was a part of either your parents' childhoods or their misspent 20s. To me and a lot of other people, he was, simply put, one of the greatest rock singers who ever lived. Heavy Metal Magazine put him at number 4, Rolling Stone put him at number 9, while MTV made him number 12 in music regardless of the genre. The man had a 4-octave range and he used every single bit of it. As an example, listen to the song Hunger Strike that he did with Eddie Vedder of Pearl Jam for the Temple of the Dog project. And while I take absolutely nothing away from Eddie being a humongous Pearl Jam fan myself, he and Chris had different singing styles. Eddie brought intensity to his singing. Chris just brought sheer, unadulterated power. The man could just flat out sing. He was also a really good songwriter, which is something that I don't think he gets enough credit for. His death leaves Eddie Vedder as the last of the original grunge frontmen alive, after the untimely deaths of Andrew Wood of Mother Love Bone, Kurt Cobain of Nirvana, Lane Staley of Alice in Chains, and now Chris. I'm not counting the Foo Fighters as a grunge rock band. They were a hard rock band that came out of Nirvana's untimely breakup, so get over that part of it. Now then, if you want to get more into their music, then a great place to start is Telephantasm, which is their greatest hits album. Then I would absolutely get Super Unknown and Bad Motorfinger, which were 2 of their biggest selling albums. Last year, the Hall did not see fit to put Soundgarden in. That is a shame and a travesty of justice. I do hope that this year, though, that they see the error of their ways and finally show Soundgarden the respect they deserve and induct them into the next class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This week's Spotlight Music Hall of Fame is the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles, California. There are actually 3 Grammy museums now, with one in Newark, New Jersey, and the other in Cleveland, Mississippi, to go with the main one in L.A. The Recording Academy runs the museums, but it has been inducting members into its Hall of Fame since 1974. The main Grammy Museum itself, with its Hall of Fame wing, opened in 2008 at LA Live, which is the downtown LA complex that has the place where the Lakers play. The museum has 4 floors, including a theater. Some of the past exhibits there have paid tribute to John Lennon, Roy Orbison, Latin singer Jenny Rivera, and the world of hip-hop. Plus, they have ticketed evening discussions with artists such as Debbie Gibson. Ticket prices, as of this recording, are $18 for adults, $15 for seniors and military members with ID, $12 for college students with ID, and kids 5 through 17. Children 4 and under and museum members are free. Its normal hours of operation are Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m., and closed on Tuesdays. However, due to the pandemic and also the time of the year, depending on when you're actually listening to this, you should check the museum's website to see if and when it is open, as their times have shifted over the past year a few times, and you never know when COVID restrictions are going to kick back in again. It's the new normal. GrammyMuseum.org is its website. Angus Young was born on March 31st, 1955, in Scotland. In the mid-1960s, his family moved to Australia in order to escape a brutal winter. There, he learned how to play the guitar. At the age of 18, he and his brother Malcolm formed a band. They named the band after something they saw on the back of their sister's sewing machine. In total, the group made 17 studio albums and a few live albums. They are one of the biggest selling musical acts of all time, having sold over 200 million copies. They've also made countless Best Artists of All Times lists. The band started off with lead singer Bon Scott. Their first album, High Voltage, was originally only released in Australia. Their second album, TNT, had the songs TNT and It's a Long Way to the Top. 1976's album Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap was when they became an international act. That album had the songs Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap and Jailbreak. The album Let There Be Rock came next, with the title track being released, and then came the albums Powerage and If You Want Blood, You've Got It. 1979's album Highway to Hell turned out to be the last one with Bon Scott as lead singer. That album had Girls Got Rhythm and Highway to Hell. In early 1980, the band finished their tour and started working on songs for their 6th album. On the night of February 19, 1980, Bon Scott went out partying in London, England. He had way too much to drink and went to sleep it all off in the back of a friend's car. The next morning, he was found unresponsive and rushed to the hospital. He was pronounced dead, the official cause, according to his birth certificate, being, quote, acute alcohol poisoning, end quote, and, quote, death by misadventure, end quote. The coroner also reported that it looked like he had choked on his own vomit, which is never a good way to go. The band was devastated and thought about breaking up, but the family and friends convinced them otherwise. They went searching for a new lead singer. And thanks to their producer, legendary producer Mutt Lange, they found Brian Johnson. The band, with Brian in tow, decided to get out of London and record in the Bahamas. Nicer weather, less distractions, a good place to help the healing process. Oh yeah, and big tax breaks at the time. The problem with recording was that they went at the beginning of hurricane season, which was particularly bad that year for the Bahamas, but got through it they did. The band decided not to do any of the songs that Bon had a hand in writing because they didn't want to seem like they were profiting in any way from his death. The album ended up being a tribute album in his memory. The album cover was all black, in mourning to Bon. The AC/DC logo, though, had to have an outline around it, and that was because of a compromise with the record label who originally objected to the all-black record. The album, now titled Back in Black, was released on July 25, 1980. To say that it was a huge smash would be an understatement. The album generated the classics Back in Black, You Shook Me All Night Long, and Hell's Bells, which has a whole other story about how hard it was to record a proper bell sound. It has become the second biggest selling album of all time worldwide, with only Michael Jackson's Thriller album beating it out. The band that was named after something on the back of the Sisters sewing machine, AC/DC. The album, Back in Black. Inducted into the Grammy Museum Hall of Fame in Los Angeles, California in 2013. And that is it for this episode of the Music Halls of Fame podcast. For more podcast episodes, which drop every Thursday in audio and video form, then please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio Podcasts, CastBox, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from.